Hi, it's Nicole. I talk about books on my channel, and today I want to share with you all the books I read in December, and let's do some planning for January. In addition to carry on with my Reading Oxford project, I spent December reading Christmas classics. I mentioned in my previous video what my Reading Oxford project is and why I started it and how much it's been helping me as a reader. If you haven't seen it, I'll put the link in the description box, and also a footnote about Christmas classics for the purpose of this video. So anything published or written before 1950 that is set during Christmas, I will take it as qualified to enter my pool of choices. I will tell you about the books I actually read in a second, but there were a couple of books that I didn't manage to get to and I was really gutted. The Nutcracker and the Penguin Book of Christmas Stories from Hans Christian Andersen to Angela Carter. I need to remember those. I have a spreadsheet keeping track of all the books. I need to remember them and try again next December. I found one title that ticks both boxes. It's on my Reading Oxford Year 2 curriculum and it's also a Christmas classic. It's not a very typical Christmas classic. You know those Christmas story anthologies? I wonder if any of them include this title or if many booktubers include this in their seasonal reading recommendations. According to our definition, it's definitely a Christmas classic. The most important parts of the story happen between Christmas and New Year, and it was written before 1950. It was written way before 1950. It was actually from the 14th century, which means that's part of my Reading Oxford Year 2 curriculum. When a title ticks both boxes, it always gives me extra motivation to read them. Can you guess what it is? It's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I always have this nagging little voice at the back of my head saying I ought to like classics because they have stood the test of time, but in reality I don't always like classics. And on top of this, I have two things against Sir Gawain and the Green Knight before I started it. First, he was one of the oldest pieces of writing that came my way, and I was a bit intimidated by the idea of reading Old English. And secondly, it was poetry. If you've watched this video, you would know that I failed poetry completely in 2021. All of this is just to say how pleasantly surprised I was with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight translated and narrated by Simon Armitage. So after a bit of intro, the story starts with it was Christmas at Camelot. So King Arthur and the great and the good of the land were having a party. A giant man, completely green, like Avatar but green, or the Green Giant, but probably a bit more vicious looking, appeared in the banquet hall and said, "Here's a challenge for you. One of you chop off my head, and a year later you come and find me and I will chop off your head in return." And Arthur said, "Oh, don't be silly, just join the party and forget about it." And the Green Giant said nope. So Sir Gawain, a knight of King Arthur's Round Table, took up the challenge and chopped off his head. And now it's a year later, Christmas again. Sir Gawain need to go find this Green Knight and ... I thoroughly enjoyed it simply because I completely understood what was happening throughout the whole story. I was gripped by the tense atmosphere in the banquet hall and this bizarre challenge. I admired Sir Gawain and his noble qualities, facing all sorts of difficult challenges, some in the form of pain and blood, some in the form of fear and anxiety, some in the form of someone else's beautiful wife. Parts of it were very funny. I understood and enjoyed a 14th century poem. I am so happy. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll do this in chronological order. I will now travel from 14th century to 19th century England. In addition to A Christmas Carol, the most famous, Charles Dickens wrote quite a lot of Christmas stories. So this is a collection of 5 novellas and 9 short stories. It's a chunky book. The hardback is 592 pages. I haven't got a physical copy to show you. It took me a whole month to finish. I won't go through all of them. The video is going to be too long. I'll just tell you briefly what the 5 novellas are about. So a novella is basically a short novel. So all 5 here are about the same length, about 90 pages. A Christmas Carol was written first of all in 1843, and I think it's definitely the best of all. It's about the dramatic change in Scrooge when he encountered the 3 Christmas spirits, and it's about the social issues, especially poverty at the time. The second one, The Chime, was written a year later in 1844 in a similar way to A Christmas Carol. This time a poor man sees an alternative life for himself and his family in a dream. I imagine Dickens had his well-off readers in mind and tried to show the society's solution for poverty were insufficient and merciless, and to correct the stereotype that the poor were born bad. The third one, The Cricket on the Hearth, and the fourth one, The Battle of Life, were written 1845 and 46. Both love stories with a lot of domestic scenes. The last one, The Haunted Man and the Ghost's Bargain, was written in 1848. This one is about a man whose memories of pain and hardship were taken away, and he was given the power to erasing all memories of pain and hardship from others. It's a discussion what sufferings do to a person. We are still in 19th century but have now left England for Ukraine. The Night Before Christmas, or Christmas Eve, is a short story by Nikolai Gogal. I was introduced to Gogal only this year, and this is the second short story I read. I don't know how to describe it. It's the most magical of the lot. It's as light and playful as a feather in the wind, but it's as down to earth and matter of fact as a sack of coal. This is how it starts. On Christmas Eve, there were stars in the clear winter sky, snow carpeted the ground, all was calm in the village. A witch rose from a chimney. As she got higher and higher, stars faded one after another. She tucked them in her sleeves. An ordinary devil appeared in another part of the sky, and he stole the moon, so Oksana's father wouldn't go out in the dark, so the blacksmith couldn't meet her in secret. The devil wanted to stop the blacksmith visiting his sweetheart in secret because he hated the blacksmith, because the blacksmith painted a fabulous mural of the devil being tormented on Judgment Day on the church porch. And I haven't spoiled anything. This is all happened in chapter 1 in the beginning of the story. It's not a long story, but a bewildering number of things happened one after another. I really love the whirlwind of bizarre happenings balanced by zooming in on everyday details. I almost didn't care how the story would end. I just want the random and whimsical story to carry on and on. Really love this one. We'll stay for one more in the 19th century, but we'll move across the world to the US. This Christmas story collection is by Louisa May Alcott. This is the most simple and wholesome of the lot. It's full of loving relationships, some family, some newly discovered family, some neighborly, some between human and animals, some romantic. In the same vein as Dickens' A Christmas Carol, a lot of them are about a dramatic change of heart during this special time of year, about forgiveness and reconciliation and the joy that comes from it. We're now back to England in 1930s. This is my first Nancy Mitford Christmas pudding. It starts with a young writer called Paul. Paul just published a heart-wrenching tragedy and received a lot of positive reviews, but he was depressed because the reviews all raved about how hilarious the novel was. So to rescue his reputation as a serious writer, he decided to infiltrate the house of Lady Bobbin under disguise as her son's holiday tutor, so he could have access to the diaries of a previous Lady Bobbin, so he could write a biography of her and to restore his reputation as a serious writer. It reminds me of the 1930s vibe from, for example, Rebecca and Cold Comfort Farm. They are very different stories, but the 30s feeling is very distinct. A kind of charming listlessness. People are all very glamorous. Everyone seems to be a lady, a lord of some sorts. No one has any real trouble. No one seems to have any real work. Their life is so languid or boring, to quote the characters. You can hardly tell what they're living for. However, in contrast to our 21st century life, where people work 9 to 5, commute like sardines, are glued to our phones and social media, be it eating or sitting on the loo. I'm quite jealous of their 1930s lifestyle. Live in a big house in Cotswolds countryside, ride horses, read great-grandma's diaries, have friends over every evening, have breakfast in bed. Among the whole lot of this month, this would be my favorite time travel destination. Next one is Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I hesitated picking this one because of the letter at the very beginning of the book. It's a letter from Agatha Christie to her brother-in-law James, and he says, "My dear James, you have always been one of the most faithful and kindly of my readers, and I was therefore seriously perturbed when I received from you a word of criticism. You complained that my murders were getting too refined, anemic in fact. You yearned for a good, violent murder with lots of blood, a murder where there was no doubt about it being murder. So this is your special story, written for you. I hope ye may please your affectionate sister-in-law Agatha." I was worried it would be too gruesome for Christmas, but in the end it wasn't too bad, and it was actually the perfect story to listen to on an 8-hour train journey. The story is about a rich old man gathering his sons and family to his house for Christmas. So in the house there are 3 married sons and their wives, 1 unmarried prodigal son, a granddaughter visiting from Spain whose deceased mother was this old man's only daughter, a son of an old friend from South Africa where the old man made his fortune, a valet, a butler, and after the murder, Poirot and 2 police officers. I tried to solve the murder along the way, but Agatha Christie was so good at making one person appear suspicious on one page and another on the next. In the end, I realized I was miles away from the truth. The last one, Twas, the Nightshift before Christmas. It's not classic, but I think it's a very fitting title. It's Adam Kay's non-fiction account of his shifts around Christmas and New Year over 7 years as a doctor. It's in a very similar style as his previous book, which I loved. It can be very funny, and it shows me the twisted, ugly and disgusting side of human, but also the good and selfless side. It talks about serious subjects like death. There's one account of him performing an abortion that stands out particularly. Abortion is a hot topic and there are many views, but this is the first time I read a first-hand surgical description of a doctor removing a baby from a womb and the impact the procedure had on the doctor. He said, "I don't feel it in my hand, I feel it in my soul." The last 2 are rereads. I mentioned in my previous video that I'd like to reread some of the titles that I rushed through in 2021. So I reread A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I really like following her thought process. And the second one I reread was her novel To the Lighthouse. I can't say this time I get much more than last time, and it's still very slippery. Now the fun part, planning for January's TBR. Sometimes planning for a month of reading is more fun than a month of reading itself. The theme I decided on is on reading and writing, so I've been researching and gathering books on how to read and how to write. The first one that came to my mind is How to Read a Book, The Classic Guide to Intelligent Reading by Mortimer Adler. I bought it in 2011 and the last attempt was at the end of 2018 and January 2019. I'm very excited to give it another go. I got 2 collections of essays by Virginia Woolf, one called Genius and Ink, Virginia Woolf on how to read, and Oxford World's Classics Selected Essays. I came across a short audiobook called English and Literature by C.S. Lewis. It's also a collection of essays including topics like Christianity and literature, high and low brows. It's fascinating. I want to reread George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, in which 4 dead Russians give us a masterclass in writing and life. You'll see in my next video that it's one of my handful of 5-star books of the year. The Wisdom Pyramid is not exclusively about reading. The subtitle is Feeding Your Soul in a Post-Truth World. It has a chapter on books, and I have a feeling it might ask people to stop reading or at least slow down. I flicked through the book in the previous book haul video. It's one of the winners of the Gospel Coalition Book Awards. I also have Reading Like a Writer and How Fiction Works on my shelf. I have read both, but I can do with reading them again. So far everything is non-fiction, which is unusual but not surprising. I need a couple of fiction about reading books or writing books, and I'm not sure what. The Gunsy Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society might be okay. Then I saw this grey spine on my shelf. It's Miss Bunco's book by D.E. Stevenson, which I found in a charity shop. I have no idea what it's about, but I think it qualifies. If you know novels where the main characters writes or reads, please leave me a comment. One book that I am interested in but do not own is Aspects of the Novel by E.M. Forster. Other possible books are On Writing by Stephen King. It seems to be very popular, but I haven't read any books by Stephen King, so I'll pass for now. Obviously, I'm not reading all of them. These are just the options. I shopped most of them from my shelves, digital or physical. I'm going to put them together. I'm really excited to see what these people think about reading and writing, and I look forward to underlining and making notes and studying them. That's all for today. Happy New Year, everyone. I'll see you in my next video.